Okay, so I have another one here, and this is a good one. I like this. This is a great question. So this question is based out of Ephesians chapter 4. In Ephesians chapter 4, verses 11 through 13, it lists the apostles, prophets, evangelists, pastors, and teachers as gifts Christ gave the church to build it up. Okay, so in the fivefold ministry described here, what is an apostle?
I think when you look at apostle, or specifically hear what it's meaning and saying about apostle, we have to first look at what is this book supposed to be about. We see this is something that Paul wrote while he was in prison, and he writes this letter not to a particular church, but as a circular letter, meaning it's supposed to go from one church to another. And what he's really doing here is this false teaching called Gnosticism has come up, and Paul realizes even from prison, he's got to do something about this. And so what Paul does in this letter is what he often does in others. The first 3 chapters of Ephesians focuses on theology. So what does Jesus teach? What does he say? And does it conflict with this false teaching, which obviously it does. But then when he goes to chapter 4, he completely switches, which is what he normally does, from talking about theology to actual practicality. What am I supposed to do with this information that Christ has given us? And when it gets to chapter 4, it starts off by saying they're supposed to walk with him, that we're supposed to have this worthy walk of loving, having patience, showing Christ's light. But then after that, he moves even to a different place and talks about how every believer has been given a gift. And he talks about some of those. And then he moves a little bit further where we get to verse 11, and he moves to leadership. When he goes into these leaderships and these gifts that these different leaders have been given, he talks about those 5, which is apostle. He talks about prophets. He talks about evangelism, pastors, and teachers. And when he gets to apostle, we have to look at in the Bible, especially in the New Testament, it kind of has 2 different meanings. So it can either have capital A, apostle, which means somebody that's actually been chosen by Jesus and walked with him in his earthly ministry. And so that's the 12 disciples, and Paul himself says he includes himself within that. And we see Paul talks about this different times. There's one time in Corinthians where his apostolic authority is being questioned. And that's what he says, I am an apostle chosen by Jesus. But here in verse 11, we see it's not a capital A apostle, meaning they were selected by Jesus and walked with him. But it's actually a lowercase apostle. And what that one really focuses on is when Paul and Barnabas were sent on their first missionary journey, they were called apostles. And so what we see is this interchanging of missionary and apostle. So when it talks about apostle, it's saying missionary. That's somebody that goes out, that's been called by Christ to go to tell the good news, to exemplify what it means to follow Jesus, to show other people what that looks like. It feels like God's called them to do that for others. And so we'll have to be careful to make sure, because apostles used, and it's not really differentiated if you don't look too closely, but it really is, there's people that have been selected by Christ himself and walked and lived with him. And then there's apostles that really in our day would be more similar to a missionary. Now, we have to be a little careful because based on maybe your denomination, you may take these meanings for apostle and have different viewpoints on them. But this is just for today, just kind of a basic, more simple understanding of what in Ephesians chapter 4, verse 11, what the word apostle represents and means.
Yeah, so you're saying, so that's the lowercase apostle. So this is someone sent, but not to be confused with the disciples and Paul, but someone sent to the church, right? To lead, to help, to guide. While, of course, that's interesting because I think we see people out there that call themselves apostles, but I think sometimes it's hard to kind of understand what that looks like in modern day. Yeah.
Don't you think there's a sense in which all of us are the little A apostle? It's not just a specific calling on someone's life. Someone may have a calling like that that's very special and missionary-ish, but that all of us are called to send the word out into the world. I mean, the actual translation is sent out. Apostle.
Yep, that's exactly what it is. Well, good.